it became irrelevant when we crossed the finish line of we succeeded on our first time. That is huge, very rarely done. There's been 32 attempts at the Jules Verne Trophy, of which 16 have been successful. Right. Only 10 have resulted in a record. So when you start to put those numbers together, you're like, actually what we did was massive. And then when we rounded Cape Horn, only 3 women have rounded Cape Horn on a multi-hull, and we made that number 11. And I was like, wow. And people questioned me whether you need to do a female crew in today's world. And it's like, clearly yes.
Hello and welcome. This is episode 5 of the Foil podcast. If anything to do with sailing, racing floats your boat, then you're in exactly the right place. Thank you for joining us. Remember, if you're watching this, then you can also download it as an audio podcast, and vice versa. If you're listening, there's also pictures too. Now, last week on the pod, we covered a lot of big offshore events that have happened in the last month, and we promised you an exclusive interview about the incredible feat achieved by the famous project. And true to our word, Freddie has caught up with Dee Caffari, so that interview will be coming up shortly. But first of all, Andy Rice, hello. Where in the world are you, Andy?
Hi Neil, I'm about as far as I can be from where you are. I'm about 2 hours drive outside of Auckland in the North Island of New Zealand, building up to the second SailGP event coming up in just over a week's time.
Exciting. So when we get to that, you'll be able to give us a sense of, stick a finger out the window and tell us what the conditions are looking like. But first up, just because you and I haven't spoken since last week, January was a ridiculous month for offshore achievements. Many records tumbling. We covered a lot of them last week on the podcast. Let's talk a little bit more about some other news that we've had in the past week.
Yes, Neil, there is something really quite extraordinary going on in the first few weeks of 2026. We're seeing one offshore record tumble after another, but one that might have skipped the radar for some sailing fans is what Belgian skipper Quentin Dubois has achieved, smashing the world record for crossing the Atlantic east to west aboard his Mini 6.5. And he completed the 4,500 mile passage from Cadiz to San Salvador in 24 days, 19 hours and 31 minutes. And that's 6 days quicker than the previous benchmark set in 2024. Now, the Mini 6.5 is pretty much the smallest racing boat capable of making an Atlantic crossing. So, obviously we've seen much faster records in much bigger boats, but to keep things going when you're the only one on board on a sort of the equivalent of a transatlantic go-kart, I think is an incredible achievement. And what makes it even more amazing is that we are in an experienced sport, and this 38-year-old from Belgium only took up sailing back in 2018. So he's only 7 years into the game, and now he's a world record holder.
So you're down in the Antipodes, and there's been a lot going on down under in the last week or so as well. If you can update us what your what vibes you're getting down there.
Yeah, just yesterday, I'm actually on a tour of the North Island at the moment, but just yesterday as I left Auckland, Pete Burling was updating us with progress on getting that New Zealand F50 put back together after the controversial port starboard incident between New Zealand and Switzerland. And the good news is that Burling and the Black Foils will be on the water and ready for that training day on Friday the 13th, dare I say it, Friday the 13th of February, before the racing weekend of 14th and 15th of February. So that's the good news. He says he was always confident that was going to be the case. But every time he comes to speak to the media, people want to go back to that incident. And Pete Burling, even though he knows he copped the penalty and he knows the reasons why, still feels that there is a bit of a strange precedent that's been set there. And, he's a bit concerned about how teams are going to deal with those port starboard situations in the future. So that will be an ongoing discussion in the world of SailGP, I think.
An ongoing discussion, but that's great news for Kiwi sailing fans and SailGP fans around the world, because you do not want to have an Auckland event in New Zealand without the black foils, and clearly Pete Burling and crew will want to come out fighting, almost with a point to prove, I would imagine.
Yeah, absolutely. And yeah, they will be really fired up. And you don't really see much of a change of emotion with Pete Burling. That's partly what makes him such a strong sailor. But quietly on the inside, yes, I think he probably is quite angry. And he will hopefully turn that to his advantage in front of the home crowd. But as he pointed out yesterday, he also, and he and his team, it's not just the points they didn't get on the board in Perth, it's 2 days of learning, because the racing that they do is the largest part of the learning that they do to take through to the next event in an F50. So they feel like they're a little bit on the back foot, not having enjoyed those 2 days of racing in Perth.
Yeah, valuable time on the water in that sport. What about the F18 Worlds in Perth? Relatively speaking, not that far from where you are now.
Yeah, well, funnily enough, that man, Glenn Ashby, one of the heroes of Perth, who stepped into the breach when Iain Jensen badly injured his knee in the build up to the Perth SailGP. Glenn Ashby, feeding the cows on his farm in Victoria, flew across the country, helped out, and then flew back again from Perth, having helped Tom Slingsby achieve second place in Perth. But actually, a few days later, was flying back to the F18 Worlds to sail with Darren Bundock, his good mate, who together they won an Olympic silver medal back in Beijing 2008. And 18 years later, this was the first time they were sailing together again. Two fantastic sailors, multiple world champions, and just going for fun. I mean, Glenn Ashby, as he said in that interview that I did with him a couple of weeks ago on the foil, he never measures himself against the competition. He's just trying to get the best out of himself. So he was going with low expectations. Having said that, they went into the final day in the lead, but both of them with really bad flu. So they're both really under the weather the whole week, not at their best, but still leading the fleet. And then they have an awful last day. They lose their way after a bad start in one race, and then they capsize at the leeward gate in another, which is really uncharacteristic for them. And then they drop to third, and that was sort of the end of the fairy tale. But Glenn was as magnanimous as ever. And instead, it was Brett Burville and Max Putman who sailed the most consistent week. Some local sailors from Perth, and Brett Burville, a bit of a legend in the world of foiling in his own right. But that's a story we're going to come back to another time very soon in the foil.
And what about Goobs Jensen, and the talk of where he might be going next?
Yeah, so Goobs Jensen been in the news recently for that injured knee, but a man very much in demand, as he is the latest hiring for the America's Cup team, Emirates Team New Zealand. So that's another Australian joining Nathan Outridge, who is the Australian skipper of the Kiwi team. And of course, it was Nathan Outridge and Iain Goobs Jensen who together won the Olympic gold medal at London 2012. So getting the band back together again there. That we see Team New Zealand going from strength to strength. But interestingly, almost no crossover now between the New Zealand Black Foils team and SailGP and the Emirates Team New Zealand team going to the America's Cup. So as far as I can think, Blair Tuke is probably the only big name that I can think of that has a foot in both camps right now.
So I guess in the future we might have to talk about whether there is actually officially a divide between the Black Foils and SailGP and New Zealand's America's Cup team.
It does very much seem that way. I think it's almost a policy that if you're going to choose one, you can't do the other. And I think that's coming from the America's Cup end, from Grant Dalton. And we sort of saw that a little bit last time with the last America's Cup and Ernesto Bertarelli vetoing any of his America's Cup sailors from sailing in SailGP. So I think some of those personal enmities at the top of the sport sometimes define where the professional sailors end up choosing to hang their wetsuit on.
And we thought we'd seen the end of the kind of transfer, all the trades and transfers in the off season in SailGP, but it's happening in the kind of coaching booth at the moment. So the Black Foils have changed support crew, and as a result, so have Artemis, I understand.
Yeah, that's right. So New Zealand now have as head coach Matt Stephen, who's joined by Will Mackenzie as booth operator. Will Mackenzie being part of the Olympic silver medal winning team from Paris 2024. So that strong continuity of ex-49er sailors like Pete Burling and Blair Tuke in the New Zealand team. And that's partly because it sort of comes back to what we were saying about this rule that you've got to choose where you're going to put yourself. And Sam Meach, who was part of the coaching team for New Zealand, has now moved across to Sweden's Artemis SailGP team. So Meach sort of putting himself in the Emirates Team New Zealand America's Cup camp, because that pretty much is the same as Sweden's Artemis SailGP team, which is sort of the Emirates Team New Zealand team in SailGP, even though it's Swedish flag. So it's all a little bit confusing. But that's part of the musical chairs going on in New Zealand because of that split between the Black Foils and Emirates Team New Zealand.
And it just means that Artemis look like they're getting stronger and stronger, which will be daunting for a lot of the other teams in SailGP.
Yes, absolutely. But, their strength when it comes to next year, when it comes to the America's Cup Naples 2027 and there's SailGP 2027, where are they going to put their chips? Where are they going to put their soldiers? Because have they got enough soldiers to fight both battles on both fronts at maximum strength? It's a looming problem, but right now it does make Artemis SailGP look very strong for the coming season. Yeah.
How exciting. We get to watch them again end of next week. So 2-hour special guest. And before we get there, let's just talk a little bit about just what a huge achievement the famous project was. The 57-day the circumnavigation of the globe. The first time it's ever been achieved by an all-female crew, non-stop in a trimaran. And it was just last week. And we spoke about it a little bit on the pod last week, but you give us your take on that and how important it is before we hear from Freddie and Dee.
Well, it is absolutely a massive achievement. There aren't that many women that have managed to get around the world in a multi-hull, and suddenly that number has escalated with the successful completion of this around the world achievement. That I'm sure that, as we're about to find out with Freddie Carr's interview with Dee Caffari, the co-skipper, there's probably going to be an element of frustration and of what might have been, because they suffered a lot of technical problems on the way around. So there will be a sense that, while this was a great achievement, how much more might it have been, and what does that mark out for the future? And as for Dee Caffari herself, it's just the continuation of quite an incredible offshore career. She's the first woman to have sailed single-handed and non-stop around the world in both directions, and the only woman to have sailed non-stop around the world a total of 3 times. And quite apart from that, she is just marvelous company. I've never sailed with Dee, but every time I interview her, I wish I had the opportunity, because she's so inspiring. And I know that Freddie Carr will have enjoyed his interview, even though it was in quite strange circumstances, because Freddie's out in Miami competing in the M32 circuit, and he's in a shared accommodation with his teammates, and for all the time zone challenges of getting on the call with Dee, he had to run out of his Airbnb and get outside at 5:30 in the morning and conduct the interview from the the warm glow of dawn in Miami. So well done, Freddie, for getting the interview done with Dee in fairly extraordinary circumstances.
Yeah, let's have a look at that now. Here's Freddie Carr communing with nature and also with Dee Caffari.
Well, thank you very much, Ricey and Neil. And obviously, you've just given just an unbelievable resume of Dee. And I wrote out a resume for Dee as well, and to give her flowers. And it was very, very long, and it would have made her blush. But it just came down to one line for me. She is, in my opinion, one of the best offshore sailors of our generation. She's been around the world 7 times. And with this latest project, not only a phenomenal lap of the planet, going down into the Southern Ocean for the 7th time, rather you than me, but there's obviously greater ramifications for this last lap. Dee, thank you so much for joining us on the foil.
Oh, it's a pleasure. It's nice to be talking to you and talk about the recent lap because it was pretty special.
Oh, man, I followed it all the way, Dee, and it first landed on my radar on your Instagram, I reckon, end of 2024 into 2025. And you were just putting little teasers out there, basically saying, we got something coming. We're going to be the first to do something. And following you from that point to starting the race, and then the most hectic lap of the planet I think I've ever seen. How was the journey? How did it get going? Take us all the way back to the beginning.
Yeah, well, that seems like a long time ago now. And if I think back to the first phone call I had, it was probably 3 years ago. Out of the blue, Alexia Barrier, French Vendée Globe sailor, rings me. She says, "Oh, I've got an idea. Do you want in?" And I was like, "Oh, okay, what have you got?" "Oh, I want to put a Jules Verne record attempt together." I was like, "Oh, let me think. Yes." It literally took me no time at all to sign on to that. But in the back of my mind, I was thinking, yeah, if it happens.
Right.
And then I was thinking, well, I know Alexia, I know of Alexia, but I've never sailed with her. And I was like, is this something I want to do?
Right.
And, kind of did a little bit of homework around it. And this is an opportunity that was not on the floor. Like, you can't find this opportunity anywhere else. And I was like, well, I'll be silly to turn it down. And, how do I fit into something that Alexia is trying to put together? And she was pretty happy straight away that, I want you to be my co-skipper. And if something happens to me, you've got to make this happen. And we actually went into a different environment. We went into the mountains with a guide. So both of us kind of out of our comfort zone, just to see how we would communicate. Yeah, just the two of us with a guide.
Wow.
Where you spend all your day walking uphill to do a little ski down at the end. And kind of out of the comfort zone. Are we still on the same page? Can we still communicate? Do we work together in this environment? Because if we can do that, that's pretty representative of, being stranded in the middle of an ocean, making some difficult decisions.
Yeah.
And it was really, really good grounding for us to decide if this was going to work or not. And it was just brilliant. Loved it. We had really easy communication. We were on the same page. We had the same objectives from it. And I was like, cool, this is going to happen. But in the back of my mind, it was still, well, will it happen? 6 months later, she has a Mod 70 for us to train on, and she's got access to EDEX Sport, the maxi trimaran that Francis Joyon had that held the record. I was like, wow, she moves fast.
That's impressive.
She is phenomenal. For a small person, just beware of what comes in small packages. And I was like, cool, this is really making big strides forwards. And we went training on the Mod 70, and we had to learn how to sail this boat. So we had a lot of people with experience come and sail with us. Brian Thompson, Tom Dawson, Jack Buttel, a lot of experience coming on board to impart their knowledge. And it was amazing. And I felt like I was learning to sail again. It was so much fun and so different, and just getting used to life on the edge and everything happening at 30 knots and needing to happen straight away.
Yeah. And
for offshore sailing, that's different.
Sorry for that. We had Pete Cummings last week, who's obviously just broken the record across the Atlantic, and he said the Mod 70 is the toughest playground that he ever plays in. He said it is the hardest boat to control, on the edge the whole time. So if there's any grounding for you to go and spend 2 months at sea sailing around at 30 knots, the Mod 70 sounds like the perfect place to do it.
It was, and that was something Brian Thompson said to us. He said, if you can sail this boat and be comfortable, you'll find the big boat easy. And we were just having to take him at face value. What did we know? Because that was the problem. No females had a lot of multi-hull experience. So, you know, we did the Middle Sea race. We went across the Atlantic on the transatlantic race. We did the Caribbean 600. And then we put an all-female team on to come back across the Atlantic. And it was like, okay, cool. You know, I feel comfortable in this environment. But we had lots of stops and starts. Over 2 years, there was a bit of momentum and then it stopped. And then there was a gap, and then there was a bit of momentum and then it stopped. And this was, you know, the sponsorship battle, getting the partners on board to finance something like this. And in the end, Alexia was putting her own cash on the line. And I was thinking, God, this is a massive responsibility for me to agree to take it on when someone's committing everything to it. And I think that's why it kind of stopped and started a few times, and it lacked a little bit of momentum for people to get behind it and get interested, because we didn't know if it was going to happen. Even at the beginning of 2025, she said to us, you know, take other work because I can't guarantee this is going to happen.
Wow.
And then suddenly April 2025, she's like, okay, big boat is a go. Mod 70's put to rest. We're going on the big boat and we're going to go this year. So suddenly we've got 6 months to learn how to sail the 100-foot try, get it ready, and then go around the world. And so it felt like a lot happened really quickly. But to pull it off on the first attempt is pretty phenomenal.
Oh, phenomenal is right. Dee, I'm so refreshed to hear about how you and Alexia went and figured out whether you could work together before you actually took on this challenge, because the world where I come from, and I know that you operate in as well, Grand Prix sailing, you kind of just chuck together and there's a few Barneys throughout the week between a crew of 20 people. And that is very much at the back of people's minds. But I guess when you're going offshore in that environment, it's probably the first thing you tick off. And how did you then go on to choose the rest of your 6 teammates?
Yeah, so I think it was really important that Alexia and I were on the same page, because it's a really intense environment and we're making life and death decisions for the other crew members. There are a couple of remits. Alexia was very keen that it was an international crew, which actually kind of makes it a little easier sometimes. And then we were quite keen that there was some legacy from it. You know, it's not about putting all the same names on the platform and delivering again. It's about giving an opportunity. And if you look back through my career, that's pretty much what I've been about. So, you know, that was music to my ears. And it's really lovely to get good energy from new blood that's, you know, full of enthusiasm, kind of no idea what they're letting themselves in for, and the rest of us should know better. Yeah. So out of 8 of us, we had 7 different nationalities. Luckily for me, we sailed in English. We also had 4 of them that had never been around the world before, and 6 of them that had never done a non-stop lap before. So when you kind of put all that together, it was a real kind of mix. But Alexia she really thrives on energy. And we agreed that all of us are learning how to sail a 100-foot trimaran. So there's no one that's coming in with lots of experience. Yes, we've got Southern Ocean experience. I've got a lot of around the world experience, but this was a new environment for us to be in. So we're all learning. And so actually attitude was the most important thing. We can teach the skills and we can give the background and set them up and prepare them for what's coming. But actually they need to have the right personality to gel this team together. And so actually the people combination was really important to us.
That's so refreshing and interesting to hear you talk like that, because that's absolutely how it should be, isn't it? And we've kind of rolled out of this world where that's the last thing that people, that kind of putting the team together and hoping it all gels, that will happen, that'll be fine. But it's so hard to make it happen. I love how you tackled that.
We've seen it because people buy in experience and buy in egos and buy in all these skills, and it's really hard to mesh those people together.
Yeah, and that arguably, and we're going to get onto this with all your trials and tribulations of there were a lot of trials. You've got to argue that if you didn't have that group, that core, that energy together, it could have broken a lot of crews. I mean, the lap itself was an emotional roller coaster. So we're going to get onto the sailing. When you started, there were a lot of the early press releases and a lot of the early communications off the boat. Thank you, Starlink. I love following all you guys on Instagram and all your stories. You started in a good bit of breeze and sort of down that Portuguese coast. It was fairly sporty, wasn't it? And the messaging coming off the boat was, let's keep it together. Let's play it a little bit safer now. There's a long way to go. Is that quite a hard mindset to get into as an out and out racer in that preservation mode?
Yeah, and it was super interesting. So, the decision to leave was literally made on the Thursday morning. Thursday night was, well, it was Thursday was Alexia's birthday. We decided to leave on the Saturday. On Monday, it was like a 50-50 chance. Tuesday, still 50-50. Wednesday, 60-40. And by Thursday, it was 80-20. And we were like, right, we're going. So Thursday night, we put the spares together with the shore team. It took us till midnight to do. And then Friday, we packed the food and got it on the boat. And then Saturday, we left. It was like we had no time to think about it. And of course, you want a good downwind start. So we went off in 30 knots, 35 knots. But of course, from Brest, you've got to go upwind to the start line. So it was horrendous to even get there. And then, we set off and it's like the sea state was horrendous. We've only actually sailed the boat together for 10 days, max. In odd days here and there. So the preparation wasn't 100%. The most valuable commodity is time, as always, and you always run out. Pilot settings we weren't really comfortable with, so we're driving more than probably we should.
Right.
And, Alexia's like, we're tired. The sea state's horrendous. Let's just take it easy. And we're like, no, let's go. But actually, her just calming us down a bit probably kept us in the game longer. And then we had an opportunity to make a window just before Portugal, and we missed it because obviously we had this conservative start. And then now we're driving down the coast of Portugal. But actually we were like, okay, this is what it's about. And we got more and more comfortable. And I think I'd say the North Atlantic, we were learning to get comfortable. Some people were going to be seasick. Some people were going to struggle to fit into how the rhythm of life is on a multi-hull. And then when we got past the equator into the South Atlantic, we suddenly got comfortable. The mileage went up. We were comfortable in the settings of the pilot. And you could see the difference in just the mileage covered, which was great.
Yeah. I mean, you then, as soon as you got sort of South Atlantic, you were over 500-mile days pretty quickly, weren't you? Once you found the rhythm. It's a massive boat. It's such an impressive boat to see. Is it a comfortable boat to be on? You've mentioned seasickness and finding the rhythm. I must say, Dee, I look at some of the helicopter footage, and that's not my cup of tea. How was life on board?
It's horrendous. I mean, you can't hide it. But I would say, in retrospect, compared to a foiling IMOCA, it is more comfortable. The trimaran, the increased length, the volume in the bows that you've got, she does ride more comfortably. But the noise, the motion down below, I mean, you're off watch, you lie in a bunk and your insides just get shaken within your body. And you just survive. And you're like, I am not going to sleep for the whole way around. How am I going to manage this? But it is amazing how quickly you do get used to it. But it's not a pleasant ride.
And you said that you obviously got all your training hours in on the Mod 70, which, as we know, doesn't have an autopilot that you use. So you had a lot of time driving live. That sounds like it was quite a good thing with some of the autopilot. Well, you said you didn't trust it, but there were problems, and you guys spent a lot more time driving than you'd want to early on.
Yeah, but I mean, you get the chance to drive this massive beast at 30 knots. It is really cool. And there's an element of you that's like, I'm really enjoying this. I don't want to not drive. But, you soon learn that while you have a full moon, it's great. You can see at night. But as soon as that moon starts to go, or the conditions get a bit more tricky, the autopilot doesn't get tired, cold, hungry, need a wee, and it's much more focused and actually can do a more consistent job. And, we'd had a lot of coaching from Brian Thompson. And, he's like, it's about consistency. You're not looking for extreme highs because you always get extreme lows with that. And you want to be consistent. And he was talking to us like round the course. And he was like, the South Atlantic, it's flat water. It's easy miles. You need to get your rest because you're about to go in the Southern Ocean. And when we got there, we were like, this is exactly what he said. How cool.
Hey, Dee, you've been in the Southern, like, come on, you're pretending like that's news. You've been down in the Southern Ocean 7 times. You knew that already, didn't you?
Yeah, I mean, and the anticipation was quite interesting. And everybody, like, my role was to take the pressure off Alexia. It was to coordinate the crew. It was to make stuff happen. And, Alexia and I talked, we made a decision, and then I would dispel the information and make it happen. And actually, for some of them, they're like, what is going to happen? And I would be like, oh, this is the last time you get to shower. Now it's going to get cold. Now you want these layers on. Now we got to check the boat because this is going to happen. And it's just preparing them for what's coming. You know, that's where my experience really helped give them the confidence of what was ahead of them.
Wow, that's unbelievable. I want to go offshore with you, telling me when to shower and telling me when to eat and sleep, because I'm useless at all those things. I'm mainly throwing up over the side, to be honest, Dee. So I just take my hat off to anyone who does what you do. The first problems, and sadly we have to talk about that bloody mainsail lock system. That really was the bane of your life around the world. You're kind of looking at that as a racer going, God, if they didn't have that, this would look, you'd be taking days off the incredible time that you did. When did that first rear its ugly head for the first time?
Well, really frustratingly, it was just as we were prepping to go into the South Indian Ocean, round in the Cape of Good Hope. We had picked up the low pressure from Brazil. We were cutting the corner. The mileage was in 600 to 700, 650, that kind of mileage. We were like, okay, this is good now. When we're about to go in the south, and then we get the first issue with the lock system on the mainsail.
Right.
And actually, that was a really big call. We lost 3 days there where we kind of half sailed, not really knowing if we were going to carry on. We had 3 decisions. Do we stop? Do we turn around, go back, fix it and go again? Or do we keep going? And it's a massive decision to take a boat that's not 100% into the Southern Ocean with a crew.
Wow.
And in my head, I thought, oh, you know, and I didn't want to limp round. You know, what's the point of going around with 2 reefs? That's not what we signed up to do. So it's really hard, and you're going backwards and forwards in the decisions. Alexia and I talked around in circles several times, and you could just see the deflation in everybody of like, well, what are we going to do? And actually, it took a lot of external input to kind of paint the bigger picture, because you kind of get caught up in your 100-foot world of this is the be all and end all, and do we risk it? Do we not? And actually, it was Quentin Dubois from the weather team, and he was like, these are all the reasons why you shouldn't stop. And ultimately it was,
amazing.
Has it been done before? No. If you do this, you will be the first team to do, the first female team to do this. How do you get multi-hull experience in the Southern Ocean? Well, you put a multi-hull in the Southern Ocean. You know, all these things that were on our fingertips. And he's just like, you know, just don't let it get beaten. And so it was really interesting. That. And when we made the decision, you know, apart from being frustrated for losing 3 days of indecision, it was like, okay, so the record's gone. So what are we doing? And it was like, okay, this is the big picture. These are now our objectives. And I was like, right, we need something tangible. So I kind of did a bit of counting. And I was like, okay, 500-mile days, easy to do. We've proved that. We can do sub 50. We can be dancing on tables for my birthday. You know, let's make this happen. And I was like, the lock is an issue. But we just all agree that every time we put a reef in or we shake a reef out, we're all on deck and we don't know what's going to happen, and we will deal with it. Which, of course, is a massive call when you're in the south. The last thing you want to be caught is with all the main up and you can't get it down. But we were like, hey, let's go do it. I've dealt with worse.
That mindset for the 8 of you and the shore team to come back with that reinforcement and why you're actually down there. There's a lot of lessons to be taken from that, sort of the outside support element. So, I mean, certainly when something breaks on the boats I race on, the outside support is I call a rib and it comes and fixes it for me. But you guys, so what did it actually look like? So let's say you are about to put a reef in, so there's a lot of breeze coming. How long did that process take? And once you put that reef in, how long did you have to commit to sailing in that configuration?
Well, it's a tricky one then, because we were, okay, if the breeze is coming, do we put it in early in case it takes us a long time to do, or do we push it to the absolute limit and hope we don't have to do it and maybe go a bit outside our parameters? So there was a constant dilemma in that, because you never knew if it was going to come off the lock to put the reef in, and then if it was going to go on the lock at the new reef. So we lost a bit of confidence. So the Indian Ocean, we were quite far north due to the weather, which was nice. It was warm, but it was that whole, do we need to reef? Do we not need to reef? And as much as you want to ignore it and just kind of sail the boat normally, in the back of your mind, especially for Alexia and I, it's like, okay, is it just for a short period of time, in which case we'll bear away and just go faster? Or is this staying for a while, in which case we're going to need to reef so that we can manage the boat? And so we made that decision. And initially, it just took a bit of time, you know, on, off, is the lock tripping or not? And it was difficult. And then we realized then that it wasn't really happening after a while. And so we tried to bounce off waves to try and shake the rig to kind of force it off the lock and onto the lock, which is, complete jeopardy. But, that's what we were trying to find a solution for. And then after a while, that didn't work either. So actually it was Bex that came up with it. We called it the Hornell maneuver. She's like, let's jibe and try and force it into the lock that way. So again, that kind of jarring motion of the rig shaking around. So luckily we're downwind to the south anyway. So we'd do a jibe to try and get it off the lock, and then we'd jibe to try and get it in the lock. And this had to happen multiple times. So that was our process. And it took between, half an hour and 2 hours and 4 hours at sometimes to put the reef in, which is just such a loss of time and speed.
Oh, man.
But also you can imagine the main's flapping around for a lot longer than it needs to. Every time you jibe in those conditions, you're just taking life out of the main. Yeah. So as we go back up the Atlantic and we get to all the destruction of the main, it came as no surprise.
Right. That broke my heart for you guys to do everything that you did with your lock problems. We haven't talked about the foil problems that you picked up, I think, around Christmas time from memory when you hooked a fishing net. And I was like, and then you ripped up from Cape Horn, you absolutely ripped to the equator. And I was like, oh my God, look at this. This is on. This is so good. And then the main, give them a break.
Exactly that. Literally, Cape Horn and our South Atlantic was awesome. We had 3 days at 30 knots in a straight line, and it was absolutely golden. And when you look and compare it to Tomacoville coming up the South Atlantic, they had a shocking time. And I said to the girls, because it's a massive psychological corner, Cape Horn. You leave the Southern Ocean, you point the bow towards home for the first time, but it's 7,500 miles, and it's 7,500 of the hardest. 7,500 of the hardest miles. And I was like, don't forget, we're going around fast. So we're still coming home into a midwinter, which is storms in the Bay of Biscay, as we saw. But you can't help but get excited. And as it gets warmer and we were still going fast, it was like, and the routing had us in on the 22nd. We were going to make sub 50 days. I was going to be dancing on tables for my birthday. And even I got sucked into getting excited, and I should know better.
I've got to ask, Dee, did you, I know you weren't on shore for your birthday, but I hope you had a little dance on the table when you got back ashore to celebrate your achievement, surely.
Oh, absolutely. Because by then it was like, okay, it is what it is. We are going to get to the finish line, and we will still dance on tables.
Good. I'm pleased to hear it. Don't let a storm and a broken mainsail stop you having fun. Unbelievable. I just, honestly, as a fan, and I was such a fan, watching one thing unfold after another. Now, you kind of have boats that you love and you hate, like throughout your sailing career. I do anyway. Boats that I fall deeply in love with and I still dream about today, and boats that I'm just like, oh, I didn't love you. How, after all of those things that we've just discussed that went wrong, how's your relationship with the boat that you've just stepped off?
Do you know, it's really interesting, especially like within 24 hours, Sodebo being 3 years old, just having got the record, and then us with a 20-year-old boat that's just done the same, that had the record before that. It was really like chalk and cheese, and you can see the development and the technology. But, actually that boat it's got a soft spot in a lot of people's hearts. It's got a lot of history. And she felt so safe, even with all the dramas we were having. We all got to the point where we were driving at 40 plus knots, and not necessarily in the south, in the Atlantic as well. So it wasn't just driven by big waves. And in the back of our minds, Brian Thompson was saying to us, you do not need to be doing 40 knots. And it was like, yes, we do not need to be going this fast, but it's so cool and exciting. And you felt really safe. You felt the boat's quite agricultural, but it was quite resilient. It felt easy to fix. It felt like it wasn't going to go wrong. Yes, we had all the dramas, but she still kept going. And towards the end, with Storm Ingrid just kind of being between us and the finish line,
how was that?
We had no sails up. We had just the headboard plugged in and the rotating wing mast, which is 30 square meters. And we trimmed that, and we were doing 18 knots. The boat just wants to go.
That's ridiculous. And after all of your trials, to then come up, as you said, into the Bay of Biscay, have 10-meter seas and Storm Ingrid. Was that some of the sportier conditions you saw on the whole 57 days, the last 2 or 3? Really?
Absolutely. That last 1,000 miles was easily the most difficult conditions. We had 40 to 50 knot winds in the south, but they're big waves, there's space. It didn't feel like any stress. But multi-hull is all about sea state. And we had probably chosen to sail in probably 6.5 meter waves max. So we kind of moved ourselves to get the sea state that we wanted, so the boat could still sail well. And as soon as you're forced, because by the time you get into the Bay of Biscay, you got nowhere else to go. And it was 8 to 10 meter waves, and it was horrendous. And that was on the 25th, we had like 6 hours of bad sea state. And the 23rd we'd survived. We didn't have any sails up. The boat was still doing 15 to 18 knots. 24th was good. We had some head sails, had the J3. We even went to the J2 at times. And then the 25th just had a last sting in the tail, 24 hours before finishing. And we had a couple of waves there where I actually questioned if we were going to finish. And I was like, no, please, 24 hours from the finish, do not let this happen. And it was horrendous sea state. There were walls of water just breaking. By far the worst we'd seen all the way around.
Is it by far the worst you've ever seen? Like, Dee, you've been round 7 times now. Was it up there?
Yeah, I've seen a few bad days, and I'd say this was up there. And I think it was up there because of the motion of the boat. All we kept saying was, thankfully, we're not in a catamaran. And everybody kept sending me messages. So I remember Enza finishing with Sir Robin Knox-Johnson and Sir Peter Blake, and they had similar conditions. They had everything streaming out the back of the boat, and we were like, thank God we're not in a cat. The trimaran felt safe, but we just were sailing a little high with the waves at one point, and it was just horrendous.
Oh my goodness. Rather you than me. And we were lucky enough to talk to Benjamin Schwartz, and he told similar stories on Sodebo, just how horrific that last 3 days was for them. I mean,
and for them, they, their record rested on that. Like how slow could they go but still get the record? Their choices were limited. We just had to get to the finish line. And actually, it was still very difficult for us to have that conversation of we're going to need to slow down at the Azores to let the worst through. And then when the main kind of gave us more problems, we were like, well, we're just going to go and live with it now. But it was still a kind of, a mental barrier to overcome. And I think the fatigue came from the emotional and mental stress more than the physical stress.
And Dee, I'm really interested to hear you say that, because I know that you set off and you crossed the start line between Ushant and the Lizard going to get the record. But you must recognise that you have set a record and put a line in the sand as well. Like that must just be huge for all 8 of the crew and everyone involved in the project. Just what a milestone this is for sailing and for female sport globally.
Well, I think we've had to realign our objectives several times along the way.
Right.
So the initial thing was we wanted to go, in the back of our mind, it was to set a reference time, but you go, because we're competitive people, you go knowing what the record is. And we had Joyon on our track, and I think the South Atlantic, we were still within a day, and we were like, oh, this is still an option. And then you have to reassess when that is not feasible anymore, and you're like, so what are we doing this for? And it was really interesting working with Tamara Chagoyan, Olympic gold medalist. She's been doing Olympic sailing for 20 years. She only knows about 100 and 101%. She doesn't know about anything else. And just how everybody individually dealt with realigning the objectives. And even towards the end, it was like, we just have to get to this finish line. It was like, well, we're not sub 50 now, so what are we doing now? Or, are we still going to get something? And I think it became irrelevant when we crossed the finish line of we succeeded on our first time. That is huge, very rarely done. I mean, I think there's been 32 attempts at the Jules Verne Trophy, of which 16 have been successful. Right. Only 10 have resulted in a record. So when you start to put those numbers together, you're like, actually, what we did was massive. And then when we rounded Cape Horn, only 3 women have rounded Cape Horn on a multi-hull, and we made that number 11. And I was like, wow. And people questioned me whether you need to do a female crew in today's world. And it's like, clearly, yes.
I think that's my favourite stat.
Still,
that's unreal.
Incredible
I love
for
that.
me.
I love that.
And then even with our finish time of 57 days, we're still the 6th fastest on Jules Verne record. So I was like, actually, that's not bad. I'm pretty proud of that.
Not bad.
And then
it's amazing.
And then we're the first female team to do it. And I think, you know, when I saw some of the media coverage over the following days, and it was like, you know, the doors have been blown open, or this is a moment in history, you're like, oh wow, I was part of that, and it makes you
That's right.
realize what you have achieved, because it's very
Good.
easy to get in your own head.
Yeah, good, as it should, because it's huge. And those stats you just rattled off just paint the picture of how hard it is to do a non-stop lap of the planet anyway. I mean, yeah, what you've achieved is absolutely phenomenal. And with my sports pundit head on, I'm there going, right, so if they didn't break the foil, if they didn't have the main lock, if they didn't rip the main, if they didn't hit that storm in Ushant, you're going around under 50 days. And who knows?
Absolutely. I mean,
and then you're into different weather
exactly
systems, and then you're right there. You're right there, and you're on a boat that's 20 years old. What I'm saying,
I said exactly the same. We could have
Good.
saved 7 days easy, and then we wouldn't have had the storm before the finish. And like as you say, everything kind of changes. And I always say this, but like now we've done a lap, we've learned what we should do, and we've learned how to sail a multi-hull around the world. So now we're ready to go.
Right. Well, there you go. This is what we want to see. I want to see this. I want to see this same group on a boat that's not 20 years old. We love E-Deck, but you might have had your moment now. And let's go. Let's go. Imagine that story. I don't want to say it out loud because I don't want to jinx it, but imagine that story. Oh,
yeah. And when you learn, I mean, that's the big thing. We've learned so much. The worst thing that could happen is that knowledge and that learning isn't used. And so, you know, I've got everything crossed.
And in all seriousness, what are the next plans? You're obviously going to debrief what you've learned now, and as you said, process it, learn and move. But what for you in the short term? How long does it take you to get your feet back on ground and feel normalish again?
Well, around the world actually takes quite a long time to recover from, but you underestimate it all the time. So next week I'm out to the Caribbean for some Caribbean sailing, Caribbean 600 on a Swan 58. So a very different environment.
Yes.
But I'm looking forward to some sunshine sailing. But so I've got some maxi sailing this year. I've got the Swan 58 circuit this year. And then, you know, Alexia's working on the momentum on the back of what we've achieved to keep the famous project happening. So, you know, I'm confident that something will happen, but what it will look like, I don't know. But, you know, if somebody wants to write the next chapter and continue to change history with us, then let us know, because we've got some great plans.
Oh, I can well imagine. And Dee, I always butcher the name of the maxi you race on because of my dyslexia. Remind me of the name of the boat you sail on.
So we're on Tilakana 2, the Wally
Tilakana 2, that's right. And now that boat, much like your round the world boat, has got a fantastic mix of male and female pro sailors on board, right? That's a real, when
really
you see that group, it's a great group. It's a great group and reflects
a female
everything.
owner, Pascal Decaux, and she wants to change the narrative. You know, she's one of the few female owners in that environment, and she's putting it across the crew. So we were 6 girls on board last season, and we're going to be 8 girls on board this season, and not just the tokenism, but actually in key roles, be it driving, trimming on the bow, data analysis. So in the key roles, and, you know, actually credit to the guys that are on board, but they just see us as sailors. It's just, okay, we're going to perform and we're going to deliver some results in the boat. So it's a great opportunity. And I think she's kind of making people reevaluate that environment.
Well, absolutely, as it should do, and as it should do with what you've achieved in the last 2 months. I mean, I saw a stat this morning when I was doing a bunch of reading around everything that only 5% of people within the professional sailing industry are female. Now, that's not right, is it? And then I see what you are doing with everything you're involved with, and it feels like we're getting there, right? With everything within the America's Cup, with the SailGP, Olympics being 50-50. It's moving in the right direction, but still got some way to go.
Definitely. And there's some real trailblazers. And, you know, I've got to credit all the levels, as you just said, the America's Cup, SailGP, Ocean Race, you know, the maxi circuit. There is change happening, and it's being forced to happen, but it is changing. It's just taking time. But I think the more it does, the more the male sailors and our peers will be more accepting, and there'll be more opportunities. And that's all we need, is the opportunities.
Well, Dee, I think you've hit the nail on the head there with the word trailblazer. And that is you. That is absolutely you. and what you've achieved, not only in the last 2 months, but everything in your offshore sailing career has been bloody amazing. and your inshore sailing career, and you continue to inspire me, and I'm sure a lot of young female sailors, which is a massive one, because that's where we need to get to. And thank you so much for taking time out to speak to us today. And like I said,
Oh, absolute pleasure.
I want to see you guys, same group, on a newer boat and go under 40 days. It's on.
Oh, deal. Let's hope we can make that happen.
Nice. Thank you so much, Dee.
Pleasure. Great to chat.
So great to hear Dee's take on things on that extraordinary 57 days around the world. And what really stood out to me is when she said there's only been 3 females to go around Cape Horn on a multi-hull, and we've made it 11. So justly proud. And well, I just wonder, Neil, are we coming to the end of this offshore patch, or have we got more to come? It's just been so extraordinary. I can't imagine what else is going to come along from the offshore scene.
Yeah, and I think it's a funny thing, isn't it? Because they're perfectionists, and Dee is an absolute legend. I wonder if, albeit that there will be some frustration, they're laying very, very quickly, laying massive pathways for the next generation of women and girls in sailing. Even though the actual they could have gone, they could have done it quicker. They had problems. So you can tell there's mixed emotions there, but fundamentally it's an incredibly positive story.
Absolutely right.
So because you're there and you're on the North Island, Auckland is just around the corner. Event 2 of SailGP Season 6. Can you sort of give us a little forecast? What do you think we're going to get conditions-wise? Because obviously we haven't got the Fremantle Doctor like we had reliably last time out in Perth. But what can we expect before we do a proper preview next week?
Yeah, so it is still very much long-range forecast, but there's a high set to come in about 8 or 10 days from now, and it looks like it's going to be either a northeasterly or a southwester, which really sounds like hedging your bets. If it is one of those, then it will be very short course racing, because it's quite a compressed race course if one of those 2 prevailing breezes comes in, which will be a little bit different to what they had last year. I think it was easterlies, and that gave them a bit more of a run along the length of the harbour. But the way it looks at the moment, it could be really compressed. And speaking to one of the teams in the last couple of days, they spoke to me off the record, so I'm not going to mention who they are, but they don't even yet know whether there will be split fleets or not. So we've got used to seeing all the teams starting on one racetrack. And remember that when we've got all the boats on the water, which we haven't seen for very long yet this season, that's 13 boats starting off one line. But it is still possible, because the notice of race hasn't yet been released for the teams, that they might be racing in split fleets of 6 and then 7. So how that would work? Well, we've seen a bit of that on practice race days. I think us racing fans are hoping that it's going to be all 13 blasting down one track, but that's easy for us to say because we're not jousting with each other in the way that we saw come to a sticky end between Switzerland and New Zealand in Perth.
Yeah, obviously we want to see 13, but to be honest, Andy, knowing the way that Russell and SailGP works, by the time we do next week's podcast, we still might not know. So, it might not be until we get into practice days that they actually make that decision officially. So hopefully we can bring an answer next week, but we might not be able to.
No, I mean, Russell does keep everyone on their toes in SailGP, and probably including himself, because I think they're only 1 or 2 steps ahead of the rest of us, and that is the fun of SailGP. It's not governed by tradition. It's not bogged down in that stuff. Russell Coutts is a move fast and break things kind of guy. I shouldn't say break things, should I? But you know what I mean.
Andy, always a pleasure. Thank you very much. And thanks to Freddie for that brilliant interview and for Dee for joining us. Thank you for listening and watching and downloading. Remember, get in touch with us. We Are The Foil is our tag, is our handle across all of our socials. All the information and videos that Andy and Freddie are making will be on thefoil.com. But for now, until next week, this has been The Foil Podcast. Thanks for listening.